Welcome to the Day 2 Keynote session of the Teaching and Learning with the iPad Conference. Join moderator Tony Robinson as we discuss your questions about implementing technology in the classroom. Panel members David Mahaley, Kelly Walsh, Kathy Schrock, Terry Hike, Jenny Sinsinger, and Marshall Cheney from diverse backgrounds are available to answer your inquiries. Now, let us join the discussion already in progress.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you today. Isn't it interesting that we're up at 8:30 on Saturday morning? But we are. If you're like me, you've just been used to getting up forever, and you always get up at the same time every day, because we get used to that. It's good to see you this morning. We're going to start out the session with just get your brains thinking a little bit and get you reflecting some and thinking forward as we move forward in the day. So we have a panel here that's going to answer some questions that we've received over the past 3 years in this conference that come up quite often. And we think they're important for us to reflect back on and share with you. And then at the end of those 4 questions, and this panel will talk to you about those things, we're going to ask you to ask some questions so that we can continue to answer those questions and provide the information that you will want to know and glean from in the future. I'll introduce the panel this morning. Mr. Mahaley has been in education for 25 years, technology consultant administrator. He currently is the head of the high school program at the Franklin High School in Wake Forest. In other words, my boss, one of them. He has a master's in educational technology leadership from George Washington University and holds several national and state level certificates. He has led iPad and other technology initiatives for much of his time in the education, as well as authored Teaching and Learning with the iPad, 20 Days to an Expert. David has organized many workshops and trainings for educators looking to maximize the benefit of the iPad in the classroom, including sessions at SITE, ISTE, EdMedia, FETC, NCTIES, and founded the Teaching and Learning with the iPad Conference series. He's the reason we have been here these 3 days. Mr. David Mahaley. Let's make him welcome. Terry Heck, next one in line. He is interested in thought, self-directed learning, and the purpose of the education. He works to help re-image learning for a modern and connected society. You can ask him about curriculum, assessments, ed tech, and emerging learning trends. Mr. Terry Heck. Kelly Walsh is the CIO at the College of Westchester in White Plains, New York, where she also teaches. It was a he. In 2009, Walsh founded the popular website emergingedtech.com, where he writes regularly about engaging students. I look down the row and I'm like, whoa. Very enhancing learning outcomes through instructional use of technology. He regularly speaks and conducts workshops about a variety of education technology topics at schools and conferences across the U.S. and online. His 2013 ebook, I think we've all heard about this, The Flipped Classroom Workshop in a Book, guides instructors through the development of their own flipped instruction implementation plan. Mr. Kelly Walsh. Kathy Schrock. In addition to teaching online for Wilkes and Arcadia universities, Kathy writes, speaks, blogs, tweets, and conducts professional development workshop, presentation, and keynotes throughout the world. She is known for her practical presentations dealing with pedagogical sound practices for the embedding of technology seamlessly into teaching and learning. Her passions are online tools to support classroom instruction, the role of emerging technologies in the classroom, copyright and intellectual property, and gadgets of any type. Ms. Kathy Schrock. Jenny Sinsinger has taught in Wake County Public Schools for nearly 3 years before coming to Franklin Academy in Wake Forest. She has really enjoyed jumping in to a school that has such unlimited opportunities with technology. She brings experience with the transition to an all iPad environment as a new teacher to school this year. Miss Jenny Sinsinger. Lastly, Marshall is the IT administrator for Franklin Academy. during the one-on-one implementation of the iPad for staff and students. A former Apple employee, Marshall brings his knowledge of technology and training skills into the environment he's most passionate about, education, from managing and repairing devices to directing and revising the vision for implementation. Marshall is always working to ensure technology serves the vision of Franklin Academy effectively and efficiently. And as a music teacher, I'm also going to provide, he is a really great bass guitar player. He was that first before he went on to work for Apple. Mr. Marshall Cheney. As you can see, we have a very varied panel that is very capable of answering questions for us today, and you're going to share their experience. So we have about 40 minutes that we'll go through these, so we'll move as fast as we can. What prompted me to move us forward as I could in reading who the panel was. But we wanted you to know their background and their skills so that you could glean the information that they have to provide for us. And my name is Tony Robinson. I'm a 32-year band director, high school, taught for Wake County for a number of years, and this is my 4th year at Franklin Academy, and hope that you enjoyed the music that the kids provided for you last night at the reception. Thank you. All right, here's the first question, panel. We'll see who wants to take this one. How can technology play a role in fundamentally altering our approach to education? Should it? What elements of the iPad, in particular, should get our attention when identifying positive education approaches toward instruction? Now that's a loaded question, isn't it? Who wants to do that one? Or share it?
I'll be glad to start.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me on this thing? All right. So, one of my favorite things that comes from technology and education is after millennia, really, of teachers having to be the deliverers of content, technology has finally set the stage for a fundamental shift in which content can be readily accessible and teachers can move, I know this phrase gets thrown around a lot, but that move from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side and really help students learn how to learn and also have the opportunity to try and truly differentiate learning in the classroom, which is another concept that has been around for a while, for decades, yet it's been pretty impractical to actually do so now by moving portions of content out of the classroom and making them available in a format where they can be reviewed and rewound and replayed very easily. You really open up the classroom to using that valuable face-to-face time in a way that has never really been possible before. So that's one of my favorite benefits of technology in education.
Anyone? Go ahead.
And I had the same kind of beginning, but I
Sorry.
it's okay. Yeah, he stole it. You always want to go first. The skills that I think the teachers need to think about when they are teaching students is the 21st century skills, the information literacy skills on how to find the information and validate it, because there's plenty of information, but they have to find out if it's reliable. Searching effectively, and the technology skills of showcasing their mastery of content, whether it's a project or a problem or whatever you're having them do for an assessment. So those are the kinds of things that can be done in the classroom nowadays.
Can you guys hear us in the back without the mic?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No? Okay.
I
You
forgot
want to
about
start
the mic.
again?
No, I don't want to start again. It was really good. Sorry you missed it.
Okay. Hello? Keep going.
Just talk.
All right, just talk. I think one of the less realized, I guess, benefits of technology is student access to unfiltered data sources. In education, we tend to have this sort of lily pad effect, where if the students are frogs and they're trying to cross a stream, we set up each lily pad so they automatically cross the stream, and they use our lily pads to do so. And that's great because they get from the beginning to the end, and they start where we think they are, and they end where we want them to end. But the internet isn't really like that. I mean, there are apps that like Schoology or Nearpod or whatever that are like digital versions of your classroom, where it's neat. First step 1, step 2, step 3, then you're finished. But I think the internet's real talent is connectivity, for better or for worse, and it connects students endlessly to incredible sources of information, like Kathy was mentioning, in terms of evaluation and credibility. That's all important, but just that access to authentic data sources is really important. You know, getting information from the internet is like drinking from a fire hydrant, is what I've heard. There's just so much information that it's almost overwhelming, but that's kind of the world kids live in. And so teaching them and giving them access and practice and strategies and frameworks to monitor and survey information on their own and access those data sources that are unfiltered on their own is really important, I think.
I think I would add in a change that I've seen over 25 years, showing up in a classroom and you're basically given, okay, here's your textbook, here's the teacher resource materials, and that was about the limit or scope of what you had available to you. Now, I mean, we're at an age that nearly anything is out there for you to have access to and be able to incorporate into what you want to teach and what you want to do. It's allowed not only you as an individual instructor to have those things available to you, but the sharing between instructors. And you know, you have thousands and thousands of teachers teaching the exact same or nearly the same content. Now there's methods and ways that they can share that with one another, and you can get the best of the best. I mean, I have some really great activities, but honestly, most of the things that I use in my class, I find with other educators or have seen other educators use involving technology that I've integrated and incorporated into what's going on in my classrooms.
Anyone else on the panel?
Well, just to weigh in on the, so part of the question focused on the iPad in particular. The one thing just to start that conversation is that the tablet niche had been around and struggling for quite a while before Apple made it matter by really just nailing it with the iPad, and that kind of began this phase we're in now of what I would call the mobility revolution. That combined, of course, with what's happened with the smartphone, which is really taking it to an even bigger level. But between those two devices, now you've got this possibility of mobility and much easier device access, which means much easier internet, content access. So the iPad really played a huge role in that.
All right, I think we went through that one pretty good. Covered some information. If you want to write you some questions down as we go along, we'll entertain those a little later. The second question, and many of you may be involved with that or thinking about it, is a shared cart of iPads the best idea at a grade level, or is it a one-on-one pilot in one classroom best to showcase the uses of the devices? What are the pros and cons of each arrangement? How does implementation change with each configuration? And as you will hear the panel discuss, many of you may have that cart approach, and we do at certain grade levels at the Franklin Academy. So we have some experience with the 101 and the cart usage, and so we'll let this panel share some of those, because some of you may be looking at that in your particular district and your particular work, and hopefully they can provide some insight as what direction you might need to go, or if you've gone in the right or wrong direction for your particular situation. Anyone want to pick up on that one, the cards or the one-on-one? Ms. Sinsinger, go ahead. Everybody wants to jump on that one.
Okay. So I came from a school previously where we did the shared iPad cart, which worked really well because that was the only technology access we really had to them anyways. But since I've come to Franklin Academy where the students do have the one-on-one ability, I definitely see the pros to that approach a lot more. When they had the shared iPad cart, we shared it among the whole school, which was really tough because, first of all, you had to run to the media center and sign up for the iPad cart as fast as you possibly could. Otherwise, it was going to be gone. And then the students, you would maybe have it for a few days, but it's not really enough time for them to delve into it as much because you spend so much time, because they don't have regular access, you spend so much time sort of training them with the iPad, whereas when they have it one-on-one every day, all the time, those first 2 weeks of school or so, after that, they are golden, and they just whip through those iPads like crazy. And then they get to take it home, and they can do the work, and they spend so much time with the course when they have it one-on-one. So I personally think that the one-on-one is a lot better. But I guess if you didn't have the one-on-one, then the iPad cart should work as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you for that. That's good. So then I'll have to jump over the table. For that, yeah. Just think about yourself. An iPad is a one-to-one device, right? So if I said to you every day, I took it and just said, you can have it from 11 to 12, that's it. You'd never learn all the things that you can do with it. But more importantly, you'd never have access when you need it, where you need it. You don't need it to have it all day long, but you need to have it there when you want it and need it in the classroom. For schools that have carts, anybody who has in charge of configuring carts, it's not for the faint of heart, as Marshall can tell you. It is a one-to-one device. For schools that don't have a Marshall, it's almost impossible. They turn it into the second grade iPad cart with configurator, then they turn it into the third grade cart because they only bought 16 gig iPads and they have to have different programs on them for the students. For schools who are looking to get more iPads or even start a project in their school, what I've seen work well is find a teacher who's willing to take the risk, give that teacher the iPad cart for the year, and they're really in charge of documenting their successes and their failures publicly. So the parents can see what happens, so the parents can see what's not happening, showcase the student work, go to school committee meetings, show what the students are doing. And a school board loves to see success, and then they say, well, look at that, so that one fourth grade classroom had it, let's get it for all the fourth graders next year. So that's one way to convince taxpayers, at least in our state where we don't have any money to do that kind of stuff, that everybody needs to have it. And that's how we did it in our district, and it worked really well because now all ninth graders have it and all sixth graders have a one-to-one iPad initiative. And it started with pilots of excited teachers. But if you're that teacher, you really have to take the responsibility. It's a big responsibility for you. You can't always show failures, but you need to show your failures also and what you learned from that. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'd say kind of the thing that I'm pretty sure we would all, at least on this panel, agree on is, well, yeah, best case scenario, we have a device that a single child can really dive into and explore and learn how to use and learn how to create and get information. And we can play that game with just about anything in education. Well, yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be wonderful if, all the teachers could have this, or, I could only have to teach and not have to do all this paperwork and stuff. And so I think that's kind of the balance we have to strike when we say, what does our ideal implementation look like? And Kathy used the word, districts love to see success. And one of the things in my workshops I try to get people to think of is, do you even know what success is for this implementation? What do you consider to be successful? How are you measuring that? And depending on what success is for your initiative, a cart may get you there. If it's the kind of thing where you're in a situation where you say, well, gosh, we can afford 1 or 2 carts, we can afford to pay somebody a little bit extra on top of their existing job to help manage it. If you don't have all the support infrastructure, the support staff, everything that it really takes to make a one-to-one happen, and all you have is the ability to do carts, you can do carts very well. And if you know what your goals are, you can have shared carts, as long as they're managed well, still achieve those goals. So yeah, I think ideally we can just list a whole bunch of pros to having a one-to-one approach. The con, the big one is money. I mean, it's super expensive to have something at that scale. But as long as you're focused in what you hope to achieve out of it, and you've got some realistic expectations that you can quantify and measure and manage, shared carts are a great way to get into that. And as long as that part of it is handled well, if you start small, like Kathy was mentioning with a trailblazer, that's who I call them. You've got your teachers that if I give them this, they'll run with it. Those trailblazer teachers, if you get some success out of that, you can grow and scale, not necessarily because the goal is we want to put a device in every kid's hand, but because you've determined, okay, success for our initiative is going to be when students are able to do this. And as long as that's something that's defined and you can work towards it, I don't think you're going to run into a place where you're saying, well, gosh, if only our initiative was one-to-one, we'd really be able to meet these goals. Because if you've got the right goals, you can use the tools that you have to get there, I guess.
Just don't be like one school, they put in an iPad lab. the kids left the classroom and went to the lab to use the iPads. That was a little bizarre.
Those iPads were probably the safest devices.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we covered that one pretty good. Thank you, panel. Let's move to the next one. And we've been talking about the great usages of the iPad and those kinds of things. We might need to back up, and as an old saying, don't get the cart before the horse. And I think this question will help us to think about the things before we jump in and do those things that we have to consider for whatever direction we want to go with the use of technology in our school and how we want to use the iPad. I think this question covers it pretty well. When considering professional development with the iPad, what is the most important for administrators, teachers, and this last one, this is the big one I have gleaned over the past 4 years, and support personnel to know in order to ensure success? That's your IT guy and the people that work in that area. So administrators, teachers, and then all the other things that make that work for those teachers and administrators. All right, panel, go for it.
Well, I'll share here to start. As an administrator, you walk into a faculty meeting and say, hey, next year we're going to all use iPads, and all the students are going to have iPads. It's a good way to get probably stones thrown at you, perhaps, in certain situations. Part of this goes to what we were alluding to with answers previous questions, which is a pilot, a plan, a clear strategy as to how do we want to bring this into the learning environment. It involves doing things like training teachers, showing them how to do the tasks that make the most sense and for efficiency, productivity, and so forth in the classroom. And it has to be sustained. If I'm training a faculty, great, we're spending a day training, but it can't stop there. It has to go on. And part of that, in my case, every month we have a faculty meeting. We try to bring in something new with technology in terms of maybe there's a teacher that has found a great app that could be used in multiple locations, curriculum, and so forth. Give them an opportunity to share for 10 minutes. This is what I'm using this for. This is what I was getting as my results from the students who were using it. And that has really helped us, because then you start building a faculty group of experts with different tool sets. And that begins to share around the school. Students do that, and as you can see, I have a whole host of students here doing a lot of different things. They also can be a resource to you building out the skills, not only with the student body, but also with educators within the school building. But sustained professional development, I would say, to put high on your list.
I would just add to that, and also add on to the answers to the last question, that about having a plan and knowing how you're going to measure success is just so vital. And it's one of the things that I see schools in particular struggle with. And I know that teachers often don't have the role they should have in that particular thing, because this is brought to them by administration, but don't be shy about raising your voice about that, right? Having a plan. And part of the plan needs to be professional development, and so often it's overlooked. Another thing just to throw out there is to think about standards, not rigid standards, but standards in terms of how are you going to handle workflow. As we've seen, and many of you are seeing in these workshops, there can often be 7 apps to do the same kind of thing, and really trying to think about which ones make more sense so we're not all trying to reinvent the wheel. It's definitely something worth thinking about.
And I would just add that PD, after the initial PD, pedagogy needs to be the top thing you think about all the time. How we're going to use this to support teaching and learning in a meaningful, pedagogically sound way.
I would also recommend, well, first of all, to honor the fact that there are different levels of ambition that you can have when implementing, or the difference between implementing and integrating technology, or just using things. The SAMR model can be useful here. If you're familiar with the SAMR model, the SAMR, are you going to use technology? Are you going to use it to substitute? Are you going to use it to augment? Are you going to use it to modify? Are you going to use it to redefine what's possible in your classroom? And so a lot of teachers get iPads. My wife, for example, she used an iPad for 2 years, and she was very much at the substitute level. It substituted for the non-technology. So she used it to distribute worksheets, to have students turn in work, really basic communication, and that's all she was real comfortable with. And she didn't want to hear anything from me. So that's happy wife, happy lives, obviously. That's fine. But, there's just a lot to the ecology of a school and learning models and what is that school's mission and what is that teacher's comfort level with technology. There's just so much to consider when you're bringing in something like an iPad to a classroom. If you think of an analogy, what an iPad or any mobile device does to a classroom is a lot like what electricity did for houses. So if you imagine the way a house would need to be designed without electricity, so what are the needs in terms of ceiling height and windows and all that sort of thing. And then once electricity is available, well, then a house needs to be, architecture can be fundamentally rethought because of the presence of electricity. And so an iPad is kind of the same way. So you can bring them in and do simple workflow kind of stuff to save yourself time and to let kids play with apps that are neat. And they go home and talk to their parents about it, and everything looks really good. But I think mobile learning, and that's kind of a broader theme here, the idea of mobile learning and the idea of putting a second or first or a second screen in the lap of every student should fundamentally change really everything. But some teachers aren't real comfortable with that. And so then that's where your professional learning network comes in. That's where your collegial relationships in your school come in, and what your principal has in mind for you. And like he mentioned, what do we determine successful? Who are you trying to please? The parents, the students, your team. I mean, there's just a lot going on. So.
Marshall? I think coming from a place where I've done training for outside of education, just people and Apple products from a variety of backgrounds and kind of the spectrum of a comfort level with technology. I think the rollout pace that you set as an administration and the environment for PD and for just learning how to use the devices, that's something that has to be a safe environment. It has to be something where you're setting your teachers up for success, and you're basically giving them a situation where they can't fail. Just kind of how you present, or here are what our expectations are. 6 months from now, we hope that you will, and set a specific attainable goal. You're going to be able to use this iPad to do, to supplement something, to bring it in. Maybe you can substitute something you were doing on paper, just to kind of bring everybody to a place where they're looking at this device and not saying, well, now I've got somebody breathing down my neck to use this somehow, so I'm going to use it somehow, and then I'm going to write down that I used it somehow, and they'll get off my back for a little while. If that's the way the implementation is going, it's going to kind of peter out pretty quickly, and nobody's going to be excited about it, except maybe an administrator somewhere who sees, hey, it looks like it's working, let's do more. But then your teacher's like, now I have more that I have to do. So if your environment from your support staff is, hey, my goal is that you are comfortable doing this, using this device to do the things that you were already doing in your classroom, but just better. I'm trusting, because I'm not a teacher, I'm trusting the teacher to know the best thing to do for their class. And if I can approach training in a way where I'm helping them learn how to use the device, I'm not teaching them how to use the device, but they're figuring it out, and I'm just kind of guiding that, and then they're able to see, oh my gosh, this thing I've been wanting to do, this can probably help me do it. Because the iPad can't replace good teaching. It can only give teachers a tool to do the things that they knew needed to be done anyway. So as long as that environment is kind of established where, hey, yeah, we're bringing in a lot of devices. And for some people, it's going to be really nerve-wracking because you haven't used one, or you're not sure exactly how it's going to pan out, but we're here for your success. And so we want to support whatever the pace ends up looking like. Whatever the comfort level is in your classroom that's going to be different. I think whatever that looks like for your organization, that's a better way to do it. There's a broader spectrum there than saying, all right, first of the year, all your students have iPads, go. Because I would run and cry in that situation. That'd be a tough one, but as long as your attitude and your environment is encouraging, and supporting, and I don't think you can go wrong with that.
Marshall, you're correct. You cannot go wrong with that. As a 32-year veteran teacher, teaching before there was computers, moving to your 29th year of teaching, they give you this black box and say, go to it. What? But as I reflect back the last 4 years, how much that we have embraced the technology, how we have seen the importance, how it helps us in many different ways, administratively as a teacher, in our instruction, and our assessments. It's been a slow, as I look back now, it was very slow the way they gave it to us, but we didn't know that they were really feeding us a lot of that material. So it kind of goes, and they sure, as a good administrator, you're going to know, just like a teacher, you're going to know how your kids are pacing. So the administrators know when it's trying to provide us with a little bit more food, so that we'll go search and find out some more things. And then it moves into your students. I want you to forget some questions because I'm going to come around to you. But in band class, was last week, we have a journal reflection, and I asked the kids to provide information back to me to make sure that they're getting it and I'm being able to assess what they're understanding. We were talking about conducting. And the reason I did that, I'm really not interested in that they become great conductors, but that they know how to follow a conductor. So I turned it and flipped it and made them the conductors. One girl told me, she said, Mr. Robinson, I was up late last night studying and my toes in bed. I said, good girl, that But what I liked about the journal that I took back, that we used the canvas, the many different varied answers that I got back, and in the way that I got them, I didn't say anything. I got one kid who took pictures of him conducting a 4/4 pattern, 3/4 pattern, 2/4 pattern, and attached it to his answer. One brought in a particular where he could draw it out, and one did a video of himself conducting. I love that. I'm like, man, they figured that out and put it back and gave it to me. I really didn't know what they're talking about. So the information that they provided you came to us in a very slow, gentle, kind way, and just gradually letting us figure it out. And when you figure it out for yourself, a lot of times it's different, and you know it's a little bit. All right, do any of you or you have her hand went up? She's burning. Here you go. Drop straight into the mic. Don't be afraid. Yes, you have to talk to the mic.
I have a question about if we're currently a K-8 school, and our high school in the area just recently went to a one-to-one deployment. But their deployment was more laptop oriented, and we have a shared cart right now of iPads. All of our teachers have their own iPad that they use in the classroom. What are your thoughts on, as a K-8 school, following where most of your students are going to be going to high school? Should you follow what the high school's doing, or should you maybe follow more of what your own thoughts are for your students currently at that school? And then, obviously, we know that they don't know technology really well and they'd be able to use any device regardless, but is there, in your thoughts and opinions, a benefit to having that consistency among the schools?
Interesting, what our next question was. Our next question was.
Unmute.
Our next question was, what about mobile technology and developing basic technology and transferable skills? So basically that comes back to, I believe that it's not about the device. It's about how you use the device to learn. So I really believe there's no problem with, Android and Windows and, iPad and Mac. It doesn't really make any difference as long as they're getting the skills that they need. For the K-8, especially the K-5, the number of consumption apps to help remediate and differentiate far outweighs the Web 2.0 tools that they can't sign into, because under 13, actually, even all K-8. So I think you're much better off with an iPad. I won't say that you can't still have a computer lab where you can teach them the basic computer skills, but I don't think there's a problem.
All right, Ms. Maher, do you take this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that those transferable skills are very important. I often tell people, if we're really struggling with, well, what should we choose? Well, think about it. 5 years ago, we did not have iPads. 5 years from now, what will we have? I mean, are we spending time on a decision that at the end of the day, the skill they're going to draw from it isn't, I can use an iPad, it's, I know how to make technology work for me in a successful way. And honestly, any of those models, when done well, can do that. And I would encourage you not to get locked into that and struggle with that for too terribly long, because it gets bogged down into money, into cost, into things that move away from the student learning part of being able to carry that out, I think, in a sound way.
All right, I'll move this way, not you. Anyone over here? I have a question.
When it comes to implementation, did you start half year? Did you wait till full year? Did you have a summer workshop for your teachers? How did you go about implementing?
Well, I can speak with the Franklin Academy. What I did, it was very purposeful. I got 30 of the devices and I introduced it to one teacher in there, and actually Dr. Hall is here, and it was his class. From that, after a period of months and finding out about the device, I mean, these were version 1, so there was a lot of challenges there that aren't there today. Expanded to a second teacher, second classroom, then went to a grade level. That happened over the course of about a year. Then we had some high level of confidence about impact to our network and infrastructure. What sort of things are key to make sure teachers know and students know about the device? Because eventually we have 500 of these. And you can predict, if I would have said, okay, 500, here we go, that would have been a very shaky start, very shaky start. And so implementing on those small scales allowed you to discover where the issues and problems might come up. And that's true with any of the technology platforms. And then you can start to replicate the successful models that you've been able to pull out of that.
Yeah, just to add that rule of thumb, start somewhere and iterate. And it goes back to what you were saying before. Don't get lost in, so bogged down in the decisions or thinking you're going to have it 100% right. You got to start somewhere. The devices are going to keep changing. Start somewhere, start small, iterate, and learn as you go.
Anyone on the panel that did not use that approach and move the other way, what did you find? Everybody starts slow, move out of it. So that tells you that's probably the best practice. Start small, little, and grow as you go. All right, we'll take some questions from over here. Make sure they're paying attention.
Good morning. I'm Charlotte Huntsburg, and I got to visit Mooresville, and it's very exciting what they're doing there. And one thing they talked about was culture, a culture change. And I wanted to hear what you had to say about that, because I think when we first start teaching professional development around iPads, we're teaching how to use an app. And teachers still maybe they have to be an expert when the children are already experts, right? And then they realized that they said that the professional development needed to be mirroring what they wanted to see in the classroom. Instead of it being a lecture style, it needed to be kind of project-based. Can you speak about our culture change that needs to happen?
Well, teachers are not known always for taking big risks. We always talk, well, I won't say it that way. We always talk about students taking risks. I don't hear a lot of stuff about teachers taking risks. You can't be afraid to fail, and you just try it, and we're not the Pentagon. You're not going to hurt anything, and just do it until you learn it. But think more about what I've seen is when districts give teachers the iPad first. That works well, but if they give it to them for too long, like all of a sudden the money dries up and they wind up having it for 2 years, it's very hard for them to think about the pedagogical use. They've been using it for themselves to take attendance and do some grading and all that, but they haven't thought about the pedagogical side. And truly, taking the substitution is actually the easiest place to start. Taking something that you do already and finding a way to do it better and easier for you is not a bad thing. Moving up to redefinition, previously inconceivable. What does that mean? If you're just starting, everything's previously inconceivable. So one thing that I try to tell administrators when evaluating teachers on the use of technology, consider where that teacher started. There might be one teacher who was doing this massive project-based thing with, all this stuff, but the other teacher who really had no tech use at all. So you also have to train the administrators what to look for and how to look for it. So professional development isn't just for the teachers. But the culture of not being afraid to take a risk. And I know Mooresville is that way.
One thing I would recommend is to be willing to think in terms of, if you want to think about culture, is a design culture adopting, easier said than done. It's easy to speculate, but if you can adopt a design culture, that's one of the, I guess, the tenets or characteristics of 21st century learning, and taking that on a school approach. Really, like when you talked about that, I'm thinking everything from instructional design all the way down to how you collect papers and workflow. And really what you're getting at is kind of highlighting the amazing complexity of teaching, of great teaching. Mediocre teaching is pretty easy. I mean, it's a lot of work, but ultimately almost anybody with a little bit of effort can get it. But great teaching is amazingly complex because you have all this design thinking. You have to think in terms of curriculum, standards to curriculum, and curriculum to units, and units to lessons, and lessons to activities, activities to assessments, assessments to data, and then back, and there's this feedback loops, and it's just really, really confusing and complex. And so when you think about the culture change, well, if you go back to that analogy of electricity and what does that change? Well, iPads change a lot. So I think what should change is your willingness to fail and your willingness to take risks. But really a lot of that comes with design thinking, kind of squinting a little bit and looking at your class and looking at the standards and looking back at the students and looking at the iPad and the standards and the students and thinking, what is the relationship? Instead of, it's really, really tempting to say, I want this app to do this thing tomorrow. But I really encourage you to do some thinking about what's possible in your classroom. And because that's the exciting part of teaching is what is learning without a sense of possibility? And that starts with you as the teacher, and as the leader of the classroom, as the learning leader, is helping your students see what's possible, and then you have to do that as a teacher. And that comes from the design thinking.
It really does change the culture of your school. And for our experience, it has been very positive culture. For you and I as teachers, administrators, leaders, we used to carry around these heavy book bags, and here we go, because we've got papers. There's all my kids' papers, all my papers right there, and then my iPad. We carry it around. You had your hand. I want to ask you to do that, representing this veteran folks.
Just a question about data storage. It seemed like when iPad first came out, one-to-one was by far the best model because kids could store their data on their own device. And so I'm just wondering how you manage that. I talked to a student yesterday at the showcase. He said the most frequently used app on his iPad is Pages, which we all know and love. And I asked him about backup, and he said, sometimes I remember to do it on Dropbox. And I said, well, what if your iPad was stolen? Or, so I'm really, really curious about there are so many options, and yet it's the old model of just saving and having it go to your server in the server room is different. Thanks for
Your response? Good question. Jamie, I'll give you a good jump on this one.
Well, my guess is whether I can realize that or not, Pages is synced up to iCloud. So that's one backup location that's done. But when I ask kids, if we're dealing with an iPad that needs to be replaced or something, I say, okay, where's all your stuff? Well, iCloud. All right, where else is all your stuff? If they're a senior working on their senior project, I'm not happy with it being backed up to iCloud. I want it, okay, send it in an email to yourself, send another copy on Dropbox. Just not because those are the right tools, but because the kid needs to know redundancy is going to save them later on. And if it's really important, I need to take the effort to not trust an automated backup, but to ensure that I'm on top of it. We definitely moved away, at least at our school, from on-site servers and backups that we manage because the cloud options out now. You can get a free account and get gigs and gigs and gigs of storage. And where that really helps you out is videos that kids are creating. But documents, the amount of storage space you need for a document is very small, so they can put a lot of stuff on there. So we have some standards at our school. We have iCloud kind of for pages and Keynote and numbers. We give the kids options of Dropbox, Google Drive, the Box app. They all kind of have their own strengths, different other apps that we use as far as a workflow integrating directly to it. So I don't think there's a right answer. There's just, in a situation, some are better than others. And giving kids the mindset that they need to back it up, that's primary, and then secondary is, okay, in this situation, what's the best method? Because what I try to do, if I ever have an iPad come in with a broken screen, my goal is within that same class period, I'm giving the kid another device. But that device doesn't have any of their stuff on it until they start signing in. And then knowing what those accounts are and knowing where they put things, I mean, that's a life skill. That's not an iPad specific management task. They need to be able to keep track of their car keys for the rest of their life. The storage, we definitely make sure that we provide kids options. By the same, kind of flip side of that, I try to set up a situation where there are some consequences to making bad decisions. So if I am looking at a kid's iPad and they are not signed into iCloud, I just tell them, if this breaks, all your stuff is gone, right? And well, I didn't really think about that. All right, well, let's pretend this is broken. What are you upset about losing it? And just try to get them thinking about, hey, this data protection is important. So that's one of the things that we have systems and we have things that we use and recommend. But ultimately, I really put the pressure on the student. It's your responsibility to back this up. Because, I'm not going to be your mom hanging over your shoulder every time you type a paper saying you need to say that. They've got to be able to get that skill down.
Do all students have their own iCloud accounts? And, high school, middle school, and are they using their school email address for that iCloud account?
At the high school, yes, they all set up iCloud accounts using their school email address. At the middle school, we don't have, since it's not a one-to-one environment, our email is all on Google Apps for Education, so they rely more on Google Drive than the middle school, but they still know how to access that. And even our kindergarten classrooms have some shared Google Drive methods that they use there.
I think we have, look at all the hands, I think we have got you thinking this morning. That's good. Our time is up. We've got to be mindful of our time for the next session. So all the hands that went up, please remember your question. Send it to us. And we'll be glad, one of these panels, members will be glad to give you some information. We want to do that. And I hope that what we did this morning did stir our thoughts and did get us thinking in a different way, in a unique way. You have been a great audience this morning. And I see you getting lined up and getting excited. Great.
Thank you for joining us at the Teaching and Learning with the iPad conference. Please visit us on tlipad.com for more information on this annual meeting. Have a great day as we all continue on our journey to teach and learn.